Hello, this time I'm just going to show you how to do the flap front, full front, drop front, whatever you want to call it, by machine, so that you can see the difference between that and how you would do it by hand. And this one, I've already done a video which is without a waistband, so the flaps, the full front goes all the way to the top. This one is with the waistband, so it's very similar to the hand sewn one that I've already done. I've prepped all the bits, so that's my centre front. I haven't got my backs attached because it's easier with this method to not have your backs attached. So it's literally, this is my front, these are my two fronts, which are sewn down the centre front. And then I've got two tabs, which I've made up already. So I've machined across the top, machined down the bottom, which is going to be machined on later, and then snipped in, and then snipped the corners, turned it through, and we've got a raw edge here. But this is a doeskin wool, which won't fray at all. So it doesn't matter that it's a raw edge. So I've got a pair of those ready to go on, and then I've done the under flaps, the bits that sit behind the drop front, and I've done those. And I've done, usually I do one layer in wool and one layer in cotton, but because this doeskin is quite dense, I've actually made these both layers in cotton. So it's part of an experiment, really, just to see whether that works, and I think it will do, and I think it'll just give a nicer finish. And what I have also done to try and improve my practice, I've made one so that hopefully when it's sewn on it will sit on centre front. Not guaranteed. I think if it sits ever so slightly over, it doesn't matter, because you want your buttons to be on centre front. But I'm just trying to improve what I do, because usually I'd leave them a bit long and let them overlap, which is a good thing when you don't know what the size of the person truly is, because it means they do have a bit of adjustment. And then this last bit is the bit I'm going to attach first, so I'm going to just move those bits out of the way for a minute. And this bit is the facing, or the back piece, to the flap, so that it's not completely raw edge inside and completely empty. So I'm going to take that and all I've done is I've seamed it up the centre so it mimics the centre front line, and then I've turned it over, double turned it, and machine hemmed it just so it's got a finished edge. In theory, I guess to reduce bulk I didn't necessarily need to seam it, but it does allow for adjustment if I needed to. So I'm just going to machine that on. It's ever so slightly smaller by the looks of things than my gap, but it doesn't matter. So I'm going to machine it, and I'm going to start 1/4 inch in. And finish 1/4 inch from the edge. Okay. And then I'm going to take my tabs and I'm going to tuck them up against that. So I'm going to just pin them in place. Just pin them, and then I'm just going to check what the distance from the centre front is. Obviously, if you want to mark a line down here, tacking line, so that you've got it already, that's up to you. And also sometimes they're actually inverted slightly, so they sit like that. I don't think I've ever seen them like that, but they have been sat like that before, so it's however you want it to sit, but I'm making sure mine is straight down. So I'm going to measure across from the raw edge to the centre front line, and I've got 3 1/8. It's just ever so slightly over that one. Made this quite a narrow, see, that's 3 2/8. I've made this quite a narrow flap, because usually this distance would be about 3.5 to 4. But there's so many variations of this, and there's so many variations of making these as well. So you know, it's a method that I've developed, and it works for me. But I'm not saying you have to do it. You don't have to. It's entirely up to you how you do this, but hopefully this will just give you an idea of how it can be done. So I'm just machining down, and I'm using about 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to end up at where the end of my the opening of my tab is. Okay, so I'm machining down to that point there. Machined from the top, and then I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. You have to be careful. The only thing with this is that you do have to be careful. You're not going to push your tab down as you start. Machine down to the same point. There we go. And that's my tabs attached, and then I'm going to attach the under flaps. Now the narrower one, because these are for men, your buttonhole sits on the top and it would be on the left hand side of the body, so it's left over right. So you've got to kind of transpose this so that because at the moment we're looking at the front of the trouser, but that would be, so this side is the left side wearing and this is the right side wearing, okay? So on the left hand side wearing, that's where I want my buttonholes to be, so that would be my shorter side. So, and what I've done with this, actually I've just realised, is I've cut this long, so I'm just going to bring it up, and can you see I'm bringing it up so that it is in line with the bottom of my tab, so that I can catch it in later. So I'm going to end up chopping a bit off the top in a moment, but we'll just pin that there for a minute, and then the longer side will go on this side, and we'll do exactly the same with that. And then what I'm going to do, because I've got a cotton here, and that does need finishing ideally, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to machine down here to the same place here, so in line with that, from that point all the way down using about 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to see if I can fold this back on itself. I might end up having to do a bit of hand stitching here, but I want to see if I can actually tuck it in and top stitch it, which I might be able to do. So I'm just going to sew through one layer. I'm just doing a foot's width of my machine, so that's about 1/4 inch. It's not necessarily the same width as if you're using domestic machine feet are usually wider, so don't go by don't just do a foot's width when if your machine foot is wider than this. Okay, so this is only about 1/4 inch wide. So machine down to the same point, and then the next step is to snip. Well, I'm going to trim across the top. So I'm going to get these, do it from this side, and then I can know that I'm cutting it in line with the top of the trouser. So cut that across there, and then do the same there. So it should end up looking like that. It's upside down now, so the waistline is up nearest me. And then I'm going to cut down here. So all I'm cutting is the actual trouser. I'm not cutting my tabs or my flaps. And then I'm just snipping back to this stitch line, okay? You need to do this so that it releases the fabric, otherwise you're stuck. It won't turn properly, okay? And then the next step, take your pins out. I usually get stabbed because I pull this through and I've got pins in here. So we can just trim off the corners there, just to make that a bit neater. Get that pin out, and then we can pull that through. Like that, and we end up with finished top edge and the finished side of the flaps, and then the flaps we can then flip round like that. So I'm going to go and press it, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do next. Okay, so I've pressed it, and I'm pleased to say that it's worked quite well. So if I turn this over, you can see that it's just covering that stitch line. I've turned that side under, so that's the side obviously that I didn't sew, and I can turn that under, and I could slip stitch that, but the whole kind of, it's not that I'm averse to hand sewing, it's to do more with the fact that if you're going to earn a living from making costume, you can charge lots of money for things, but you may not have very many customers, which is fine. It's two ethoses really. Charge a lot, and you'll be busy, but you'll make less things, or charge less and have more customers. and that's kind of my kind of viewpoint. I'd rather make things well, but I'm under no illusion that I'm a top scale costume maker in any shape or form. But I can make a pretty decent costume, and you can get it from me from a reasonable price. So because of that, I need to make sure that I can do things in a quick way. And to sew that seam that I've just sewn there by machine is quicker than I could probably thread a needle to sew that seam. So it's working out what you want to do and where you want to do, how you want to position yourself in the market. I also, which is why I'm showing you different way. I'm showing the same thing but in different ways quite a lot of the time, so that you can see that there are different. You'll end up with a very similar result. I'm not saying that it's the same result, and I would say because of my the way that I've worked all these years. So that's the right side. Because of the way I've worked all these years, I think my machine sewing is better than I would trust my machine to sell something that I've machine sewn rather than what I've hand sewn. But that's just because I'm not as confident with my hand sewing. So I'm just going to turn over these little bits at the ends and machine them, just so that I've tucked up the raw edges. Like that. Okay. And then final bit. I'm very pleased with the fact that also this bit here is going to lay like that, and it is laying just over centre front, but I'm actually quite happy about that because the edge of my waistband will meet that, and then that will mean when I've done my buttonhole and buttons, the buttons will sit on centre front. So that's actually, although it's not on centre front, that's actually better. My fear is always that I end up with it on the wrong side of centre front and have to redo it, so which is why I get a bit laissez-faire, I think is the phrase, about where I put that piece, or how long I make that piece. But I made the effort today, and it's paid off. So that's what it looks underneath, and then I'm just going to make sure that that's sat underneath as well, and then I'm just going to machine across down across up again. Okay, and create a little box. I go over ever so slightly onto the front here just to give it a little bit of strength, because that is a weak point, and then that's what it looks like underneath. Make sure that's lying down there, and there we go. And we create box. Okay, and then that is my fronts ready for the side seams to be joined together, and then the waistband to go on. So I'm going to attach the side seams, prep the waistband, and then I'll show you that step as well. So I've joined my side seams, and I've also got a dart in the back there as well, so I've put the dart in. And then the next step is for the waistband. So I've just prepped the two waistbands, and all I've done is cut the wool and then the lining, and I've cut the lining so it's quite a bit longer, and then measured, because I've got this discrepancy in the width of these two bits. I've measured from here to the end, and then made that piece of waistband the same length, and by doing that I've machined the two layers right sides together, machined across the top and then down the straight, leaving this back bit raw. Okay, so I've just machined across top here, down there, and down the front, and then done the same on the other side. So measured from here to here, so right at the back of the edge of the trouser to right at the front, and then made that piece of waistband the same length. Okay, so it's raw edge at that end, but it's a finished edge at the front. Okay, and then the next step is I'm going to pin that on, matching up the front edge. And just pin it all the way along the top edge here. I've made my waistband all in one piece. You can, if you want to, do it so that you've got a seam down the side seam. If that's, you might not have enough fabric to do it all in one piece. Or also you might want to allow for alterations at the side seam. So sometimes a good idea to put a seam at the side because of that. Also, just to remind you, I've cut the waistband on the straight of grain, but the waistband lining is cut on the bias. So the strength is that way, and it's got a bit of give there. And what it'll mean is that when I machine it, because I'm going to machine that on, it'll just give it a bit more movement. It won't get twisted. And then this one, we'll do exactly the same. So pin my centre front, or it's not my centre front, it's my front edge to the front edge of my waistband. Just work along the top edge, pinning them together. As I do it, I will probably take the pins out, and I will, any bits that are offset, I will just tidy up as I go along. What you do need to make sure you do is make sure that your side seam allowances are open, and whatever way you've pushed your dart on one side, so I haven't actually decided by the looks of things, so I'm going to push the excess of the dart to the back of the trouser. I expect there is a right and a wrong way of doing that, and I never remember which way it is, but I just think as long as you get them both doing the same thing or mirroring each other, it's fine. So I'm going to attach the waistband to the trouser. I didn't say, but I think it's quite obvious. I've obviously pinned it so that the right side of the trouser is against the right side of the waistband, and I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just machining the two together. I do sew over my pins occasionally, but it's really bad practice to do, because if you hit your pin, you can damage your sewing machine basically. So try and remember to take your pins out as you go along, and make sure that any seam allowances that you're going over that you can't see are still open. See, just done it again. There we go. Right, and then when I get to the front edge, just need to make sure that those do match up. There we go. Okay, and then the next step is to press that seam open, and then put the lining over the top. So press that seam open, and then put the lining over the top. So I've done that to the other side already. So those who were eagle-eyed of you, you might have noticed that I'd already pressed the lining up. What I usually do is use the edge of the wool side to press up the lining against, and then that gives me an edge to lay down, basically a finished edge, finished fold. And then I've pressed on this side. I've pressed that seam open, and then I'm just going to put a few pins in to hold it in place, because I'm actually going to machine on the other side. So and all you've got to do when you're doing this is just make sure that the raw edge of your lining is enclosed, because the wool's not going to fray, so that doesn't matter. If you are worried about the wool fraying or whatever fabric you're using, then push everything up into the waistband, but this will give a cleaner finish. And then the only bit that we do need to have a little fiddle with is here at the front, because you don't want it to be too bulky, and you don't really want that raw edge coming down here. So I always tuck that last corner up. Yes, we're going to have a raw edge there, but I don't think it matters too much. And then we're going to lay that over the top like that. And if you are really worried about it, you could always do a little slip stitch across there, or even machine, I suppose. But I'm just going to The thing that I am fully aware of is that when you machine over a bulky bit like this, you can end up pushing the fabric forward that's underneath. So I'm just going to try and make sure that that's pulled back a bit, just so that it sits back. And then as I machine, it'll all move backwards. Okay. So that's what it's going to look like on the outside. So I'm just going to machine, and what I'm doing is I'm going to stitch in the ditch. So I'm going to machine in there, okay, so that you can't see it, hopefully. Just take your time with it. Don't rush it, because you just want to make sure you try and get that stitch in that ditch so that it's not visible. Usually trickiest over the lumpy bits like the dart, but today I think I may have succeeded. There we go. So that's machined on, and then on the wrong side, or the inside, sorry, you've got a nice folded edge. Yes, you've got a raw edge under there, but I'm not worried about that. It's not going to fray, and it just looks nice and neat. Okay, and then once you've done the other side, as I said earlier, you can just join your centre backs together, and then that will, depending where your centre back finishes, that will sit back like that. You can trim that cotton away so that you can't see it, and then usually what I do is just either machine or herringbone that flat, just so that it keeps it nice and flat. And then that's the centre back of your, and the waistband of your trousers, full front trousers done. So as I said, it's just a different way of attaching the full fronts. I'd like to give you all the different possible variations of how you could do this. Obviously that side's not done yet, but that's how you're going to end up with it looking at the end. So, which I don't think is a too bad representation of a pair of Regency full front trousers, basically. So thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it, and please like and subscribe. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll find different ways of how to do this, and going forward I'm going to post different ways of how to do pockets. So this pair haven't got any pockets at all, but how to do the side pockets, to do a pocket into the waistband, etc. So come back at another time and have a look at that, but in the meantime, please like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye.